Hey party people, Techno back again at the Sans Holiday Hack Challenge 2023. We're picking up where we left off in the last video, which was solving that Reportinator challenge for Noel Bowtie, and going on to take care of the next challenge listed on our badge here in Rudolph's Rest. Let's go ahead and open up our badge, take a look at what that objective is. And this is going to be Azure 101. It's another 2 out of 5 Christmas tree difficulty, so nothing too complex. And the challenge here is to help Sparkle Redberry with some Azure command line skills. Find the elf in the terminal on Christmas Island. So this very much is in the same vein as last year's AWS CLI 101. That challenge giving us some of the fundamentals of utilizing the AWS CLI. This one is an extension of that, giving us some of those fundamentals around the use of the Azure CLI. Okay, let's go ahead and find our next challenge. So we'll stroll over to the other side of Rudolph's Rest. And here we see Sparkle Redberry and the Azure 101 Cranberry Pie Terminal. Let's see what Sparkle has to say about this particular challenge.
Hey, Sparkle Redberry here. So I've been trying to learn about Azure and the Azure CLI, and it's driving me nuts.
Understandable.
Alabaster Snowball decided to use Azure to host some of his fancy new IT stuff on Geese Islands, and now us elves have to learn it too. Anyway, I know it's important and everyone says it's not as difficult as it seems, but honestly it still feels like quite a challenge for me. Alabaster sent us this Azure CLI reference as well. It's super handy, he said. Honestly, it just confuses me even more. If you can spare a moment, would you mind giving me a hand with this terminal? I'd be really grateful. Pretty please, with holly leaves on top.
Alright, well I think we can help Sparkle out with this particular challenge. Let's go ahead and take a look at the hints that came along with this challenge, and we have one in particular, which is just another link to that Azure CLI reference. So once again, like the AWS challenge from last year, this one is going to give us a lot of links to different documentation to review so that we can figure out which commands are not only available but appropriate for the task at hand. It takes a little bit of trial and error, takes a little bit of digging through the documentation. We're going to kind of bypass that in this video, as I'm just going to show the commands that are appropriate to the task at hand. But nonetheless, all of the documentation is provided for your reference. Let's go ahead and jump into the Azure 101 Cranberry Pie Terminal here and see what the first challenge is. So we may not know this, I guess not, but the Azure CLI help messages are very easy to access. First, try typing AZ help, and then they pipe this out to less. So some of the output from these commands is going to be quite lengthy, so piping that out to less is going to help keep everything on screen so that we can, review everything from top to bottom rather than just catching the tail of the output. So here is the output of that help command. And interestingly enough, we get an error here. Not quite sure what all of that is about. Broken pipe. But we do have our next task at hand, and that is going to be showing our account information. So we've already been configured with credentials, and we're going to use AZ account show, highlighted here in green, to show the current details. And again, they're reminding us to pipe that out to less so that we can see the full output. Let's do Azure AZ account show and pipe to less. Okay, so here we have that output. We can see things like our ID. This is something that we're going to need moving forward. We can see the name, our state, tenant ID, all of this good stuff. So definitely one that we're going to need for more commands, or as to provide as arguments to these commands, is going to be the group ID here, or rather just the ID. This isn't the last time that we'll see this. Our follow-up task that we have is going to print this output as well, but we can just copy that off now. So we get a pat on the back for doing that. Now get a list of all the resource groups in Azure, and then some link to some documentation to do that. Let's go ahead and exit out of our last command, and I'm going to clear that broken pipe output, and then we will do an AZ group list, again piping that to list. So we don't need that ID quite yet. But what this is going to do is it's going to give us a list of our subscriptions. So we have two. We have North Pole RG1, I assume that means region 1, doesn't really matter, but North Pole -RG1, and we have North Pole -RG2. Both are provisioned. We see one is in East US, one is in West US, and we also have subscription information where you can see that UID again as part of that URL or that subscription ID, basically. So this is all useful information that we're going to need moving forward. We're going to take advantage of both of these names here for these resource groups, as well as our ID for the follow-up commands. So now we can go ahead and exit out of this. And what we're going to do is, for the next task, is to use one of the resource groups to get a list of function apps. Now for more information, again, they throw some other links our way. So what we're going to do here is use the command az function app list, and for this we have to provide some additional information, one of which being the subscription ID, which we copied out. That's this long UID that we have, the string. And then we're also going to specify the group name, and in this case we can use one of our two groups, like North Pole RG1, and then of course we're going to pipe this out to less. And here we get a whole ton of output, and then it's going to ask us to find a way to list the only VM in one of the resource groups that we have access to. And again, a link to some more information here, so we can kind of review this data if we want, but we can move on to the next task. The command for listing those VMs is going to be az VM and then availability -set. And then once again, we're going to need, we're going to use the list command here, and then we're going to have to provide our UID for our subscription, and then a group. So we have two groups that we can try out here. Let's do North Pole RG1 first, and we can pipe that to less. And in fact, we get an error, well, not an error, but a notification that says that we don't have the authorization to perform that action on this group. So that's not going to be the appropriate group to list out our VM. So let's switch this over to North Pole -RG2 and see what our output is. Okay, now we get some information regarding a VM. We can see that we have the virtual machine that's named np-vm1, and then we have various other information about this here as well. And it is located indeed in resource group North Pole RG2, as we found, as we needed that information to list this out. So now we're being asked to find a way to invoke a run command against the only virtual machine that we have access to, this virtual machine, so that we can run shell script and get a directory listing to reveal a file on the Azure VM, and links to more documentation. So let's break this down a little bit. What we're being asked to do is use the run shell script command through the Azure CLI. And we want to the command that we need to run is to return a directory listing. So that's going to be the ls command. Let's go ahead and exit out of this, and let's do exactly that. So the command here is az vm run command invoke, and then we're going to once more supply our subscription ID and the group information where the VM resides, which is North Pole RG2. And then we need to use the TAC-N argument to specify the name of the virtual machine, so that's going to be np-vm1. And then the actual command that we're running, and this is the one that they gave us, right? The command ID run shell script. So that was provided to us, and then we need to specify the scripts flag, and the command that we want to run to return that directory listing is going to be the ls command. Finally, we will pipe this all out to less so that we can review our output. And here is our output, and we've completed the Azure 101 challenge. So not too bad. This one was a little bit less involved than the AWS challenges from last year. However, I do have to agree with Sparkle that going through the documentation for the Azure commands was a little bit more tedious to pull all of this back. But we got it all done. Let's see what Sparkle has to say now that we've achieved that.
Wow, you did it.
Yeah, wow, we did do it, didn't we?
Makes quite a bit more sense to me now. Thank you so much. That Azure Function app URL you came across in the terminal looked interesting. It might be part of that new project Alabaster has been working on with the help of ChatNPT.
Sounds like a little hint for later.
Let me tell you, since he started using ChatNPT, he's been introducing a lot of amazing innovation across the island. Knowing Alabaster, he'll be delighted to tell you all about it. I think I last saw him on Pixel Island.
Okay, so we have a clue to another island in the Geese Islands chain here.
By the way, as part of the Azure documentation he sent the Elves, Alabaster noted that if Azure CLI tools aren't available in an Azure VM, we should use the Azure REST API instead.
And link to the documentation to the Azure REST API. So we're getting a lot of hints and information that will be useful later in the series of challenges here out of completing this Azure 101 challenge.
I'm not really sure what that means, but I guess I know what I'll be studying up on next. Wow, you did it.
Okay, so we can kind of take a look at everything that came out of that. We did get some additional objectives, so the next challenge that we have listed here is probably not the next challenge we're going to tackle, because this is a full 5 out of 5. So certificate shenanigans, but a preview of things to come, and then again, a lot of hints came out of that one, such as the VM access token hint, referencing utilizing the Azure REST API if CLI tools aren't available. That's going to be for that certificate shenanigans challenge that we just saw pop up. But that's not the next one that we're going to tackle, so now that we've completed the 2 challenges here on Rudolph's Rest, next video we'll do a little bit more exploration on this part of the island, and then we'll probably set sail to find some new shores and some new challenges to tackle. Until then, I do want to say that I truly appreciate everybody who watches. Thank you very much for that. And until next time, I will catch you later.